Okay, let's just start. Uh, Hello, everyone, and welcome to our interview ready series, Data Science Edition by Women Who Code Singapore. I'm really glad you all could join us. And if you'd like, you can turn on your videos and audios to ask any question whenever you need it. Uh, so, Women Who Code is actually an international nonprofit organization that provides services for women pursuing technology careers and a job board for companies seeking coding professionals. Our global community consists of engineers, data scientists, solution architects, executives, managers, etc. Our mission is to inspire women to excel in the technology careers, and we stand strong with a vision to build a world where women are representatives as technical executives, founders, VCs, board members, and software engineers. So I am Toshal Patel. I am an AI engineer at a Singapore startup called Loretta IO. I am originally from India and I came to Singapore to pursue research at NUS, and eventually I joined in for my master's. And I'm really passionate about AI and to create impactful solutions with AI. Tonight we have with us Monique Bakker. I'll let her introduce herself. Monique.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Monique. I'm a senior data scientist at the Boston Consulting Group here in Singapore. I started here about 4 years ago. My background is in business administration, and after that, I did a master's in operations management. And after that, I did a PhD in systems engineering and engineering management. And after that, I started working here in Singapore, and I'm still at this same job.
It's great. Good to have you here, Monique.
Thank
So
you.
tonight we have different ways that you can interact with us. You can use the chat box on Zoom to ask any questions that you have during the session. You can also use Twitter with the hashtag WWCode interview ready to post any comments or any questions or any suggestions that you might have for us. Or we are also on Instagram and Facebook. You can also talk to us during or post the session on Telegram or our Discord channel. Our meetup group, we also have a meetup group where we post different events and you can join us on there as well. Uh, Let me post the links in the chat for everyone to just connect to us. Okay, there you go. Okay, you can also go on the womanwhocodes.com/Singapore website to join us for volunteering purposes and just to be updated with the events that we have. And let's move on to our main event. Why we introduced this interview ready series. So we all know that preparing for interviews is very overwhelming. And a lot of us are working at jobs that we are either bored of, maybe we're working in toxic workplaces, or we're just fresh graduates who want to pursue data science careers. And preparing to switch jobs or like change your field is obviously scary, overwhelming, and difficult. Hence, we are here to raise awareness on how to prepare, tips from fellow women who have successfully managed to switch their jobs, and to be on top of things together. So let's to get a job as a data scientist, there are many different interviews that you have to pass. Monique, what are some kind of interviews that you have encountered?
Well, I've encountered many different kinds. Two of them, or let's say there are four types. Behavioral, we have case interviews, we have technical interviews, and we have coding tests.
That definitely sounds overwhelming and actually similar to my personal experience. All the interviews that I have given, it generally starts off with a coding test, and there are like 2 or 3 rounds of technical interviews where I'll meet my potential colleagues and or hiring manager, and then final behavioral interview rounds. And all the interviews are generally spaced out in like 3 weeks, and by the end of the round, I will receive a verdict for my candidacy. And to tackle this overwhelming but inescapable journey of getting a job, we all have to go through different parts of the sessions. So today we will be discussing the coding test and technical interview. We'll start by explaining what happens during the interview and some sample questions and our tips for succeeding in this interview. Then we'll also do a mini mock interview to analyze it afterwards. So let's start with the coding test first. Monique, can you help us explain different kinds of coding tests that you have come across?
Yes. So in my experience, just as a side note, by the way, in my job, I often interview candidates for my company. So they often come to me after the coding test. So I'll explain a little about the coding test, and later when we talk about the technical interview, you'll see that it comes a bit from the perspective of our types of interview, but I also try to keep it more general. So please feel free to ask questions, whether specific or more generally about interviews. So about coding tests, yeah, what I've come across is that there are live coding tests and the take-home kind of coding tests. In most interviews, you'll see live coding tests. And this means that the interviewer is watching your screen as you write your code, right? And you can ask questions throughout, you're talking with each other. For example, the interviewer may say, if you write this function this way, it might make it slow. Can you think of a way to speed it up, make it run faster if you were to pass a bigger set of data through it?
Mm, I see. Can you explain the coding test in detail and how they like?
Yeah, so let's take the example of a take-home coding test. Usually the candidate would get, for example, 1 week to complete the test. And once
Mhm.
you click on the link and go there to start, you'll often have, often you can do a little sample just to familiarize yourself with the platform and how it works. But after that, once you really start the test, uh, for example, at our test, you would have 2 hours to complete it.
Oh, okay, that's actually interesting. I've had a little different experience. I mean, I was given take-home coding tests and given 1 week to complete it. Generally, solving these 1 week tests would be targeting like a complex computer vision problem. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So there's a variety. So it's a good idea to find out beforehand what kind of test, what kind of coding test they'll be sending you, right? Like, is it something you work on
Mhm.
throughout an entire week, or is it something you access once and then you complete within 2 hours? One test I recently came across had 6 questions, and they all build on a single problem, and also using one small data set. And again, this was the kind of test that once you get started, you have 2 hours to complete it. So the first question here was just to see if you have some basic ETL skills, right? Extract, transform, load, that stands for. Um, they check, can you effectively join two data sets together and do some calculations off of that? And then after that, you're required to prepare some training data, train a model, and evaluate its performance. So this is kind of the typical um, pipeline of a data science solution. So this means you need to think about several things, right? Such as what are my predictors and what is the variable that I'm going to try to predict? What kind of algorithm should I use? And do I need to explain why I chose this one? Furthermore, what kind of evaluation metrics do I use? And do I need to explain the pros and the cons of this? For instance,
Mhm.
if you choose accuracy or ROC curve or things like that, why do you choose these and what are the pros and cons? And
Mhm.
also, of course, what does this metric mean? Huh? Yeah, so to take the example of accuracy, let's say you got an accuracy of 75%. Is that good or is that not good enough? Should I be looking at several metrics together? Um, So sometimes there are also questions that you answer in text to give these kind of explanations. Or for example, questions like, explain how you can verify that your model results are correct. Or what kind of problems do you think you may encounter when building a model for the kind of problem presented? And the answer that they're looking for is, for instance, things like, well, we're working with heavily skewed data, so we're going to need to do some upsampling or downsampling, or SMOTE or some technique, for instance.
Oh, I see. Actually, that's very insightful. Just to add on to what you just mentioned about the take-home test, I have had like a different experience where I was interviewing for some other companies for a data scientist role, and they gave me a live coding test for 1 hour, and where they would generally share an online IDE and give for the given problem, I will have to solve it within the given time. And in my experience, I've noted that it's very important to have a discussion with the interviewer while we're solving this problem, like to be vocal about your thoughts and the approach to the solution. Also, generally, interviewers are very kind enough to point out if you're taking a wrong or a complicated path. So overall, they are kind of judging you on good coding practices as well as the clarity of the basic concepts for a programmer. So with this in mind, Monique, would you like to give us like 3 highlights or tips for taking coding tests?
Yeah, let me see. I think the most important tip is when you start, review all the questions first, because it's going to help you plan how much time to reserve for each question. And it also helps you plan to maybe answer the text only or the multiple choice questions if you come to a point where the code questions are a little stuck. Yeah, I think that's one. A second tip that I have is, of course, to practice before the test. You may already have years of coding experience, but it may have been a while since you wrote pure Python or you used pandas or something. For example, if you spent the last 1 year only writing PySpark, that's what happened to me. For more than a year, I was just writing PySpark, and I noticed that when I started using pandas and normal Python again, it was like, oh, I need to get used to this syntax again. So you may have
Right.
forgotten the exact syntax, right? So make sure you refresh this before the test.
Yeah.
And I think as a final tip, don't get bogged down if you get stuck with a bug, if the function you're trying to write is not quite running, because
Right.
you have limited time. So when under pressure, you may have made a small little mistake in the syntax and now it's not running, but you can't seem to figure out what's wrong. So the tip
Mhm.
here is to allow yourself a predefined amount of time for each question. And then if you can't quite get it to uh, give out the right answer, relax a bit, go to one of the other questions first, if you can, especially like if the questions don't build on each other too much, and then
Mhm.
revisit the question later when you have time left.
Right, right. It's actually very insightful. Monique, if you don't mind, we have a question from the audience. So
Hmm.
Anne Lynn is asking, at what levels data scientists or senior data scientists do we expect to have coding tests?
Oh, well, I think you kind of have them at any level. Where we do hiring, we definitely have them for data scientists, senior data scientists, lead data scientists, and sometimes even above that. Now, there are cases where, if someone really comes in at a quite high management level and their coding was years ago, that we don't expect
Mhm.
them to do a coding test.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Monique, for that. So let's move on to technical interviews. Monique, can you explain what technical interviews are, how they go about?
Yes. So typically, you're presented with a specific problem statement or a situation, and the interviewer wants you to explain how you would approach it as a data scientist. Uh,
Mhm.
the technical interview can be interviewer led or candidate led. It's quite
Okay.
important to know what kind of interview it's going to be before you get started. So don't hesitate to ask them. Okay. Um,
Okay. Can you explain the difference between interview-led and candidate-led interviews?
yeah. In the interviewer led type, the interviewer will guide the conversation and prompt you with questions. And in the candidate led, you're expected to guide the interviewer through your approach and thought process.
Okay, I see. So do you get these statements beforehand or on the spot for candidate-led interviews?
For the kind of interview that I do, there's a technical component, but it's a little bit more a case interview. And so, yes, in our case, you get the problem statement on the spot.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's
Great.
important there, that the candidate takes 2 minutes time. We give the problem statement. The candidate checks his or her understanding, like, oh, am I correct to understand that it's this, and this is the problem, and this is the product, etc. And the interview goes like, yes, that's correct. And then you go, okay, let me take 2 minutes to think about this. And then literally the candidate takes a few minutes, and it's not awkward. It's completely fine. It's good that you take a few minutes, structure your thoughts a little, and then you start presenting how you would approach this problem.
Okay, that sounds actually great. We have planned a mini mock interview tonight so that it helps us get an idea about how the technical interview would go. So, would you mind us going ahead with that?
Yes, that would be great. Let's do this.
Okay. So let's start this mock interview. I am the interviewer and you are the interviewee. So I'll be asking you the questions moving on. Okay. So hi, Monique. You are working at a tech venture that does several things. Their main business is food deliveries and ride hailing, but they also offer a number of other services, such as utilities, and they're also a payment platform. They constantly add new offers, such as discount at retail stores, grocery ordering, door-to-door parcel delivery, and many more. They're concerned with their customers leaving to start using a competitor's service instead. How would you approach this problem as a data scientist?
Let me see if I got it right. So this tech venture offers food delivery and ride hailing service, door-to-door parcel delivery. They have a payments platform as well as other products and services. And they're looking for a way to keep their customers from leaving to a competitor. Is this right?
Yeah, that's right.
Great. May I know two things? How long has this venture been operating, and what's their biggest and second biggest service?
So they started in 2014, and their main business is ride hailing, followed by food delivery.
Got it. Thanks. Let me take 2 minutes to work out on a framework, and
Yeah,
then
please.
2 minutes later, we don't have to really pause 2 minutes right now, but
Okay.
2 minutes. I would literally take 2 minutes, maybe even a bit more. Then I would come back and say, okay, good. So I think there are 4 topics I'd like to discuss. These are data, modeling approach, evaluation and impact, and ideas for the more longer term perspective. So I would like to start by exploring what kind of data we have to work with. I'd be looking for several categories of users' data, such as their billing and payment data, services used, when and where, their online behavior, uh, the way they click around in the app, uh, and any customer service data that's available, any queries and complaints that they have had in the past. And very importantly, I would like to have previous campaign data. So whenever other advertisements have been sent to them, I would like to know how they responded. Did they click? Did they buy? Did they open? Etc. All of this above would be great to have for a minimum of the most recent 2 years.
Okay, so let's assume that we have all of this data to our availability.
That's great. I would then start with exploratory analysis, sense check the data, get an impression of data quality, and look for some apparent patterns. Also, if there's not already some indicator of churn, churn meaning the customer leaves to the competitor, I would start formulating a proxy. For instance, if usage dropped significantly, or if the user stopped their subscription. Ideally, we would also like to know the reason. So hopefully that data is captured too, but we might not be that lucky. Next, I would address the modeling approach. So it generally makes sense to start with something that can be easily explained, right? A random forest, for example. We can take all the aforementioned data as inputs, as predictors. Let's assume that we've made some features out of that, and we use this churn label, either some like churn label that they already had or something that we've developed as a proxy and like agreed with the team that this is a good proxy. I would use that.
Okay. Would you considering trying multiple models?
Yes, I would try different types of models, like apart from random forest, I would try an XGBoost or a logistic regression. I would try to keep with the more explainable models at first, because in my experience, when it's a new problem being tackled, it's always important to be able to understand what goes on inside the model.
Interesting. And what if you're not getting the results as expected? How would you backtrack what you could have done or what could have gone wrong?
If the results seem to be too good to be true, I would first check for leakage, right? Did a proxy of the label somehow make it into my predictors? Or did I somehow include information of the future into the model? An example here is if they churned, they will no longer pay bills, right? So if I'm predicting churn in March, but I actually included billing information of March, that would mean I've introduced leakage. On the other hand, if the model is not good enough, I would go back to hypothesized relationships and see if this can be found in the exploratory analysis of the data. For example, if we expect that churn is related to the amount of usage, can we see this in the data? If, for example, we split the customers into groups of high, medium, and low usage. And apart from this exploratory take on it, I would make sure that I've tried tuning the hyperparameters of the models that I'm using.
Okay, sounds good to me. Please go on with the rest of your solution.
Right. So the third topic that I had in mind was the evaluation and impact. I think it's only useful to build a model if it can prove to be able to have impact, right? In other words, help prevent churn for this company. So I would backtest the model on a holdout evaluation set and measure what proportion of churners we can capture in the top 1 or top 2 deciles of customers, rank ordered by the model's probabilities.
Okay. In this, what do you mean by impact?
So by impact, I mean what proportion or how many people can we prevent from churning? So for example, if we can capture 70% of churners in the top 2 deciles after we rank order them, and let's assume that we can prevent half of them from churning if we send them an attractive enough offer. Then we can go and calculate total money saved, because we would need to know the average margin of a customer and how much the attractive offer is subtracting from that margin.
Okay. Your approach overall sounds great, but if I were a non-technical stakeholder, how would you explain this model rank order to a non-tech person?
If we chose to use a classification algorithm, the algorithm not only gives you the predicted class that each customer belongs to, churner or non-churner, it also gives a probability, a value between 0 and 1 meaning the most likely to churn. So if you want to target churners, you can sort the customers by this probability from high to low.
Okay, that sounds clear. So let's move on to the last topic.
Oh, right. Yes. Ideas for longer term. Since we will have cleaned and prepared all this data and features for churn, I think it would be a good idea to use this for other purposes as well, such as cross-sell and upsell.
Okay. Let's say you have done model backtesting, and now you would want to test it live on a group of customers. Before you do this for all customers, you need to pilot it on a sample of customers first. And compared to business as usual, how would you know how many customers you need to be able to pilot for this? Would it be 1,000 customers, 100, 10,000? How would you select that?
Hmm. I think the number of customers is a trade-off between the risk of the model not working well enough versus the effectiveness of business as usual. So business as usual here means whatever marketing is already doing by themselves to tackle this problem. I don't know exactly how to determine the number of customers needed. I would need to research this a bit and get back to you.
Okay, thank you, Monique. So let's end our mini mock interview here. Although I do have a question from the audience. Go is asking, what does it mean to formulate a proxy?
Oh, so a proxy means that, okay, let's say if you had a very clear label of churn, it would be something in the data that literally says that the customer uncontracted or the customer uh, unsubscribed, then it's pretty clear, okay, this customer left. Then all you need to figure out is, okay, did he leave to the competitor, or
Mhm.
did he leave for some other reason? Maybe, because deceased or moved out of the country. Ideally, you would narrow it down to only those who left because they went to the competitor for service, the same service there. If you don't have a clear label like that, you have to find other data that might be an indicator of the same. So maybe someone didn't unsubscribe, but they started using the service less and less and less. Like maybe they used to log in at least 5 times a week, and then they logged in twice a week, and then they never really logged in anymore. So even they're still subscribed, and maybe they're even still paying some. Let's say it's it's an app and it's a small fee or something. Um, if they're not logging into the service anymore, then they're not using it anymore. So that actually means that they've churned to the competitor, and it might be a matter of time before they even stop their subscription or the paying, if there is any paying. So you would use that as that's what's called a proxy. Like it's not the exact label, but it's some other indicator or some other variables together that give you an indication that this customer has stopped using your service.
Okay, thank you so much, Monique. Go, I believe that's a little clear. If you have any further questions, you can post it in chat. So I'd like to move on to the next section where we are going to analyze the mini mock interview that we just had and point out a few things. So as you saw that it was really like a conversation between the interviewer and the interviewee, and we started out with the situation, and the conversation became more technical as the interview went on. So there are some of the points that I'd like to mention. First of all, it's okay not to give a perfect answer or not knowing everything. And it's important to admit if you don't know something. And it's also important to take your time to collect your thoughts and resolve any doubts rather than acting on false understanding. Also, as an interviewer, what I was looking to see that the candidate can present a structured approach to a typical data science problem. It is generally very important to have a structure to your solution as it highlights your problem solving and organizational skills as well, and how you explain it to someone in a better way. There are some typical frameworks to these solutions that you can find online and prepare your before your interview. Generally, this sort of resonates with like a machine learning pipeline that we had. Like Monique started off with data and data cleaning, feature preparation, then choosing a model, then deciding how the model performs, and then backtracking the solution. Finally, your impact and how you would explain it to the non-technical stakeholders. Um, as a data scientist, you will also be asked questions on whether you've tried multiple approaches to a problem in the past or in the given situation for the interview. And hence, while formulating a solution, when you have 2 minutes to think about it, come up with at least two methods or two algorithms, their pros and cons, like what are your reasons for selecting those particular models, and how it's going to help you build the overall picture for the problem. Um, Also, the last point I have to share here is that it's important to know how to explain your approach to a non-technical person or stakeholders. It is very common interview question, and generally as data scientists, you are responsible for explaining the solutions to business problems that companies might have or they are focusing on. And you should practice those as much as possible before your interviews on sample problems. Monique, do you have anything to add here?
Yes, I think in the last question, that question was how many customers do you need for the pilot, right? Toshal was referring to minimum sample size needed to guarantee statistical significance at a certain level of confidence. And what I was trying to demonstrate there is that I didn't have the answer, but I didn't try and make something up. I admitted that I don't know, and I would have to research it a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for that. We do have a question from the audience. Sonakshi is asking, what are the existing frameworks for such case interview solutions? I believe like if you do a simple Google search, you'll find out the basic solutions, basic frameworks. But I do have a resource, like a very good link that I might be able to share for this. Just give me a few minutes and I'll find that out and post it in the chat. Okay.
Oh, and I think don't forget to thank the interviewer for the interview. So Toshal, thank you for your time and have a good day.
Thank you so much, Monique. It was actually good. I think I have one more additional tip here that sometimes the interviewer will also share why they are asking certain questions. So these are the best interviews where it feels more like a conversation and less like an interview. It's because these people interviewing you might be your future colleagues or hiring manager, and if you end the meeting on a tone or with an impression that you had a good discussion with them, it's actually a good impression that you leave on them, and actually it's a good sign of being a team player. So do remember that, and always you can have certain tips where you answer in a certain way that actually ask make the interviewer ask the other question, like you leave certain topics out, certain questions that you suspect that the interviewer might ask, and prepare that. So it's actually a very good skill, and it definitely comes with practice. So do practice a lot before you move on.
Yes, I could totally agree with that. And I think the third tip that we can give away here today is when you explain things, use clear examples. And like Toshal is saying, like prepare in advance. So even these examples, you can prepare them beforehand. Even if you don't know the exact problem that you're going to be presented with. If you've done data science work before, think about that work. Think about, okay, what was the problem statement? What solution did I apply, or what other solutions could I have applied? And think of examples of pros and cons, etc., for those solutions.
Right. So thank you guys. This is all we have that we want to share. If you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you for listening to us tonight, and hope this mini mock interview and the whole session was insightful and you gained some important pointers for the technical interviews. And we hope to see you for the future sessions as well. We'll be disclosing the topics and the event dates as soon as possible. And remember, the interviewers on the other side are also data scientists like yourself. They are also logical beings. So you do not need to know everything. Just know what you think a good data scientist should know. And it also helps to volunteer to be interviewer or shadow interviews at your own respective companies. So please let us know if you have any questions in the chat, or you can just like unmute yourself and ask the questions.
Yeah, and meanwhile, while we see if there are questions, we can keep sharing a bit of our experience. For me as an interviewer often, it also, towards the end of the interview, it also makes a good impression if you have one or two questions about the job or the company that you're applying for. And even if it's a bit of these standard questions like, oh, what's the culture like at your company, or what's the day-to-day job like, or something like that, it's okay to ask even those kind of questions, because it'll still be different from company to company, and it just shows that you are interested to know a bit more about what you're actually applying for. If you can, of course, do as much research as possible about the company and the role that you're applying for, and ask more specific questions about the role. For instance, let's say like, oh, you've talked to someone who has worked at this company before or something, and they know a bit about the role progression. You can ask questions about that, like what's the typical tenure for role progression, and is it standardized, or is it completely up to merit and availability of the next role? Try to ask questions like that, that shows that you've done your research, and you want to know more about this company in specific.
Right. Actually, just to give a quick addition to that, I have this question that I always ask in the last round of my interview is how do you, like, this is generally with a person at a much more manager position, and I always ask what is the key to success for a person in this new role, like, because when I was interviewing as a junior data scientist or like an entry level AI engineer, I was always looking to add more to my skill set. So I would always ask, how do you define a successful candidate in your company? And this would always baffle them, like, okay, someone's asking how would you define success? And it generally turns out to be a good conversation, even though he's a higher level director in the company, for the tech team. It's always to have a good conversation and how they define success that also reflects their values as a management of the company. We do have a couple of questions from the audience. So Michelle is asking, how do we handle interviewers who questioning your experience handling data sets? Example, in the case when you are changing from one industry to another, example, engineering to marketing.
How do we handle interviewers who question your experience handling data sets, changing from one industry to another? Toshal, do you want to take a stab at it?
I've generally, I would, in this situation, I would say that handling, I would take some time. Okay, the normal approach to handling any data set, like we have the standard steps, right? I would get familiarize myself with the data set, take some time to see what feature engineering I can do on it, etc. But the domain change, right? Like from engineering to marketing, I believe data is data. So once we get familiarized with what kind of data that we are dealing with, probably we might have a better way to engineer the features, or like go ahead dealing with the data. But Michelle, is there a specific situation where you face this? Like, do you want to explain a little more about it? You can actually unmute yourself and ask.
I think for me, I've experienced interviews where I actually get questioned whether I am suitable for a certain role, especially since I might not have come from that same industry. So even if I give like the typical data science pipeline answer, like how I will explore the data, I will also talk to stakeholders and so on. I realized that this question comes up a lot. Like I think in a particular interview, I actually got a question back like, your current industry might actually have a lot of data sets that are actually more structured rather than unstructured data sets. So how can you prove to me that you can actually overcome the experience, or rather the inexperience of not being able to handle unstructured data sets in your previous jobs?
I see. Okay, thank you. Thanks for this, Michelle. I think if the differences between structured and unstructured data sets, be truthful about your experience, but feel free to explain that there are, there's a wide array of machine learning tools and algorithms that are specifically aimed at this goal of making sense of unstructured data. So for everyone else here, or some people who may not know the difference precisely, structured data is what is already basically in tables, and ideally each table has some keys that you can join them together with. So one table would be, let's say your demographics, and the other table is your usage data. And because you have a unique user ID, you can join the two together, and then you have all the data for this client. Unstructured data is anything like, for instance, what you guys are typing in the chat right here. It's free text. People have different writing styles, different sentences, the way you write it. Unstructured data could also be voice or video data, or tweets, anything, Facebook posts, anything out there, anything that's not in a table in a specific column. That's more or less unstructured data. And the most common methods I think applied there is things like natural language processing, NLP, and that's a whole subfield of machine learning. There's a lot of really advanced stuff going on there, because in the world, I don't know the numbers anymore, but the amount of unstructured data in the world grows by X amount of petabytes a day or something. It's a ridiculous amount. So I think here, if they ask this kind of question about the changing from one industry to another, there are two different things. Like, one is the domain change that Toshal mentioned, and the other could be the change of the type of data, and that means you need to start applying a different type of machine learning. But the tools in machine learning are definitely there, so just be truthful about how familiar you are with those kind of tools, because they're different from the more old school structured data kind of approach that you would take. And for the domain difference, I think it's important that you say, like, look, when I start working on data that's in a domain that is new to me, I recognize the importance of roping in the domain expert when I don't know exactly what the data means. So you can do your data analysis and find some findings, but make sure that there's some domain expert that you can test these findings with. Like, oh, I'm seeing this. For this group, this value is much higher, and for this group is much lower. Is it because this value actually reflects ABC? And then this domain expert can help you understand that.
Thank you.
We have the next question from Esther. What is the balance between business-related data science questions versus more technical data science questions like explain gradient descent, etc.?
Yeah, so I'll take a stab at this one. I'm going to give you a very typical answer. It depends. I think it really depends on not only even just on the company that you're applying for, but also the level of the interviewer. So how it often works when you apply is your first 1 or 2 rounds of interviews will be with someone more junior or more at the same level that you're coming in at. And then after that, there will be maybe 1 or 2 more interviews with a more senior person. And I think typically the more junior person will ask you the more technical data science questions, and the more senior person will ask you the more business questions. So I think in a nutshell, as a data scientist, you do need to be prepared for both.
Right. Esther, if you have anything to ask, you can unmute yourself. Okay. There's a direct message to me. Hi, may I know what are the typical number of interview rounds for roles as a junior data analyst? junior. Monique, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah,
But
again,
I
I think
think
that depends. Typically, it'll be more than one. I'm pretty sure of that. Um, so I don't do the interviews for our roles of data analyst, but I think it's 4 rounds. And for data scientists, it's actually 6 rounds. Our company uh, hammers down on that quite a lot. But um, it does work in such a way for us that usually it's 2 rounds, 2 rounds, or 2 rounds, 2 rounds, 2 rounds. So
Mhm.
after the first 2 interviews, they decide if you go on to the next round with the next 2 interviews. And so for data
Mhm.
scientists, you do that 3 times. And I think for analysts, for junior analysts, you'll have 2 interviews in the first round. And if the outcome's good, then another 2 in the next round. But I don't know how representative that is, honestly.
I might add something to that. So in my experience, like I've interviewed for a lot of companies and I mean different kinds actually. So for consultancy firms, generally my experience has been like for data scientists, the number of interviews are a lot. Like even at BCG, I'm sure, like as you mentioned, it's like 6 rounds of interviews. But for other places, like for example, like companies like Grab or Gojek, they generally have like maximum of 4 or 5 rounds. I would say that would include the behavioral and the first interview call. And generally, it's super. It depends on the company, of course. Like junior data analyst, I understand that it's a little different role from data scientist, but the number of interviews wouldn't vary a lot. It should be somewhere around 4 to 5 interviews for max. Um, there's one more question as to ask, like, how do you prepare for the more technical data scientist questions, following up on the previous question that she asked?
Hmm. Well, the best way is probably experience, like getting on the job experience. But of course, now they're going to tell me, well, that's chicken and egg, right? I need to get the job before I can get the experience. That's true. So another way that you can try and get this kind of experience is uh, look for problems online. Like, so there's coursework where you tackle specific problems like in Udemy and things like that. There you can already find out some uh, technical things, because the best way to learn this is to solve the problem yourself, rather than
Mhm.
just reading about what gradient descent means or something. Like really building a problem where you write the algorithm that calculates this or something, you know. So there's places like Udemy and things to learn this, and there are resources like Kaggle or something where you can also tackle a specific problem that is presented. And as you embark on this journey to get to a better solution, you will you'll already find that, okay, you run into a little problem, and then you go and research the internet and Stack Overflow on how to resolve this. And I think that again is kind of the same way where you learn by doing. I think that's the only way. You're not going to learn just by reading Medium articles, or
Mhm.
LinkedIn posts, and not actually trying to solve the problem yourself.
Yeah, actually, I've always believed that Kaggle is like the major playground for data scientists if they want to try out any problems. And actually, they have like levels of problem. It can be complicated. It can be like just a basic logistic regression problem. So it's really good to try out some things there. And as well as I've noticed that these places, as you mentioned, like Udemy and Coursera, they have these online courses that probably are free. Some of the free online courses might have some exercises to solve. So those exercises might be just like multiple choice questions, but some companies in their take home or a normal live interview rounds, they do ask some multiple choice questions. So that might be helpful. Um, and I believe that apart from that, yeah, just the Kaggle, I think, is the major resource for data scientists. And for the normal other technical problems, you can just practice, coding questions. You can go to HackerRank, etc. Okay, Alice is asking, is it important to have a portfolio of personal data projects to be selected for the interview? Mm,
I'll go. Yeah.
I
So I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I
But
think it's not important whether they're personal data projects or like projects that you've done in a different job with a team, because both have pros and cons. If you show your portfolio of team projects, I think what might be important for the interviewer is what was your role in that team, right? Like,
Mhm.
can you explain exactly the things that you contributed in that project? And if it's your own personal data projects, they may be interested. Of course, it helps, and they may be interested in how you solved those personal data projects. But the piece that would be missing there is that most likely you did all of that by yourself, and maybe there wasn't much time pressure. So it's very much a different scenario than than the scenario of being on the job and working in a team. That said, it does show that you have this willingness to learn and improve your skills in your own time, and that is a very good characteristic to show.
Right. Mm, yeah, and I think it's just like I'd like to highlight this point that you just mentioned, Monique, that in the team, what was your contribution? Even during the interviews, when you're explaining about your experience that you had, if you're a fresh grad or if you don't have much experience in the previous projects that you might have led individually, in my experience, what I've had with interviewers, it's always start off with what you did, and obviously start off with the problem statement first, and then start off with what you did and how you contributed, because they're not really interested about listening what the V part was. So lead your statements with, I built the model, I was responsible for this, not we did this, we did that. So there was one of the things that I specifically learned over over my interviews. Please feel free to ask any more questions that you might have. If that's it, I have a small request that you please switch on your videos so that we can take a screenshot of today's session,
A photo.
a final group photo.
We will allow some time to quickly switch on a virtual background if you want to. Thank you. Yay, we have some people.
It's good to see faces.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish we could have offline events as
We will
before.
again soon. Yeah, hopefully.
So,
Yeah. Any more people who want to quickly switch on their video for a photo, a group photo? Okay, I think let's take it like this then, Toshal.
can okay. Um, for some reason, my screenshot thing is not working.
Okay, I can take one on my
Okay,
side.
um, it's working. Okay, say cheese. Thank you all. Thank you so much for attending our session today. Please connect with us on any other social media platform, Telegram group or Discord. If you have any further questions or suggestions for our future sessions, we can try to incorporate them. And if you have any specific questions, we'll try to answer them there. So, yep, please hit us there.
Thanks,
The link
everyone.
for the social, yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you. The links are in
Just to
the
let
chat.
you know that your Discord invite link is actually expired.
Oh, is it? Let me send
Yeah.
the new one then.
Thanks.
You can join the Telegram group for now. I can send the link there as soon as my Discord starts up. I can send the invite link there.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Michelle. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Toshal. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks, Monique.
Thank you.
I think everyone is out. What do you think about the session? How did
You can
it
stop
go?
the recording.